Yo. uh Damn. I just kind of woke up a little bit ago, but I got a bunch of damn shit in my eyes and whatnot, but this one something different. I don't know if this is going to be funny or what. Uh I thought it would be interesting. Idiocracy is becoming real. And I thought it was very fitting for the time we're living in. So it's kind of long, it's 20 minutes, but I'll try not to pause too much and shit. It's from Upper Echelon
This video is
channel.
brought to you by Ground News. Stick around to hear more about the special offer they're providing to the entire upper echelon community.
Okay.
Okay, how many people watching this have seen or ever heard of a 2006 movie called Idiocracy? I
I
would guess
have.
that there's a pretty decent number of people who have, at least nowadays.
Yeah, I
But
seen
you
it
might be surprised to learn
once.
that the movie's eventual popularity was actually never intended from the start. For those of you who have seen it, you can probably skip ahead a few minutes right now because you already know the plot, obviously. But if you haven't seen the film before, it's
It's been a
effectively a
while.
scathing critique of American corporatism. The main character, Joe Bowers, and a lady of the night, if you will, named Rita, become the subjects of an army experiment, cryogenic freezing in this case, but instead of 1 year, they get frozen for hundreds. After finally waking up in 2505, I think it is, they re enter the modern world and they find out that everyone around them is basically brain dead. Basic infrastructure is now falling apart. Everyone drinks Brondo instead of water, which is like a play on Gatorade. And the film is basically a never ending string of jokes
Yeah.
about how everyone has become an idiot, which leaves the two main characters, who are decidedly average back in the time that they come from, as the most intelligent people on all of planet Earth, simply because of basic logic, mental aptitude, and deductive reasoning. It's honestly prophetic, in a sense, when it comes to the concept of corporate advertising, at least. People buy
Mm.
everything that they want from a city sized Costco facility, where they're greeted by someone who says, "Welcome to Costco, I love you." They get treated in the hospital by plugging little sensors into their mouth and their ass and their ear as well, with a drooling human operator who doesn't even really know what's happening, as the machine spits out a diagnosis for them. And all over the place, everywhere, you see a kind of
Oh, what the
logical extreme
fuck?
in the world of attention advertising, which now caters to people who are barely even smart enough to communicate with each other. Language has become a sort of broken slang. The most popular show on all of television is a program called Ow My Balls.
Jackass.
And the movie even tackles the concept of hypersexualization, where Starbucks now offers handjobs. Obviously, it's way over the top
Damn.
extreme, but when you watch it, you start seeing a whole bunch of oddly similar and kind of uncomfortable parallels, which might be the reason why the film was initially suppressed. Most people don't know this, but the movie
I don't know that. Okay, how was it suppressed exactly? Um,
His publisher, 20th Century Fox, actually tried to kill their own product launch. They only released it in 7 different cities using the contractual minimum legal number of theaters, something
uh-huh.
like 130 as opposed to the normal 6 or 700. And they specifically did not market the release with trailers, advertisements, or press kits. Whatever their reason was, they intentionally took a budgetary loss on their film in order to kill its reach. But over the years since, it managed to become massively popular.
But
Now, I'm not a
why?
film critic. This isn't a video about Idiocracy as a piece of cinema. It's
Okay.
about how the most extreme version of hyperbolic comedy, portraying the whole world as a slobbering mass of idiotic consumers, is becoming real. And I want to make a much more data driven argument right now about why
Yeah.
and specifically how that appears to be happening. However, there's one key difference here. In the movie, the degradation of human intelligence, and basic cognition for that matter, is a function of birth rates. As the more affluent portions of society struggle with choices about when or why or even if they ever want to have a child, those around them, the idiots, are breeding like rabbits. The film asserts that over hundreds of years, less intelligent people having much more offspring, as a kind of twisted evolutionary inversion, overwhelms the entire population, therefore dumbing everyone down to a level where they can't even hardly think for themselves. As a commentary on predatory capitalism, in addition to that, large corporations happily step in to monetize that issue, creating a sort of death spiral of sorts, ultimately resulting in people getting dumber and dumber and dumber with each passing generation because none of them are ever forced to think for themselves. It's a fun
Mm.
movie, I do like it, which again has extremely
Man, my throat
uncomfortable
keeps messing
parallels
up.
now. But setting aside the obvious and more surface level ones, like teenagers speaking with broken, grammatically absurd slang, or advertising as a concept invading deeper and deeper into our everyday lives, I want to make the argument that the cause of those issues is not a function of birth rates or genetics. It's a
Right.
function of the tools that we're making, which supplant our own critical thinking. Let's get to it.
I agree with that because you could see people who have poor upbringings, shitty parents, mean parents, stuff like that, and the kid is actually smart and nice and behaves differently than them. Um, you can see like a person that has like a drug addicted or alcoholic or gambling parent, and because of that, they're the complete opposite. Like they see what not to do, in a sense. Um,
I want to take a
Component.
minute here and go on a bit of a tangent, I guess, because lately it feels like there's an overwhelming trend where the quality of what I call consensus news seems to be going rapidly downhill. Maybe that's because way too many people get their information from social media posts where the first word is breaking in all caps because it's just engagement farming, let's be real. But
Yeah.
it's also because media standards in general have gone wildly downhill. As a solution to that, I deliberately work with a platform called Ground News, which is today's video sponsor as well, because pulling together information from numerous source media, which aggregate and profit owner can further political advantage to believe it.
Let me
There's, for
skip
whatever
through
reason, percent
this.
off for 40% off a small exit plan
Sorry,
today.
buddy.
Big thank you to Ground News for
Skipping
sponsoring the
through your
channel.
advertisement.
Okay, let me start with this. A small example first, and then we work our way up the ladder. Spell checkers. Spell checkers are ubiquitous now. Everyone has them at practically every single level of education and work because they're embedded directly into our devices, which means at a certain level, after a child has learned basic grammar and spelling techniques in school, they'll begin using spell checking software nearly 100% of the time in their day to day lives. No big deal, right? Spell checking software helps us, but what if I told you it doesn't just help us, it also stagnates us? According to the
Mm.
International Journal of Social Sciences and Educational Studies regarding EFL students, which is English as a foreign language, quote, with the advent of technology, writing devices are now equipped with autocorrection features that automatically corrects or generates a list of potential words to the author. This has made the task
Yeah.
apparently easier. However, based on the cognitive load theory, when there is not enough effort and time given to complete a learning task, the chances to learn effectively reduce. End quote. Further down, quote again,
Yeah.
having taken the aforementioned reasons and challenges into account, the primary aim of the present research is to investigate the effects of autocorrection features on spelling competence among EFL learners. End quote. This may seem like nothing, I get it, but if you go all the way down to the results on page 108, you find this quote, the control group, participants who hand wrote writing tasks and assignments, performed enormously better at reducing the number of misspelling words in their tasks in comparison to the experimental group who typed written tasks.
Okay, but what does define enormously? Like how much?
End quote. Lastly, from the conclusions, obviously quoting again, students who are deeply immersed in using programs with auto spell checker features don't hone spelling competence as students who depend on handwriting due to the fact that there is more effort involved in handwriting that makes the learning more sustained. End quote. Of course, that is just one study, though it does very clearly seem to indicate that handwriting and putting in more effort will make you process learning better, and typing with a spell checker does not help you learn when it comes to English as a foreign language. But it is echoed elsewhere, right? The general premise. From University Technology Mara, a study called The Influence of Spell Checkers on Students' Ability to Generate Repairs of Spelling Errors, in the conclusion paragraph, page 10, quote, this research suggested that spell checkers have little to no effect whatsoever on students' spelling errors on the cognitive level. It did not help repair the errors, and the corrections are not internalized, thus allowing learners to
Yeah.
repeat the same error. End quote. Like I said, we're
So I've been listening to a book every now and then to help with it's called Make It Stick. Um it's a book called Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter C. Brown, Henry uh Rowe Rodiger the third, Mark McDaniel. one of the things that they talk about, at least early on in the book so far, is that trying something and then failing it as you learn helps you learn better than if you took the route where there was no failure. So trying to handwrite something and spell it out and make your own sentences and failing at it and spelling the word wrong and making the sentence structure wrong and having not enough commas and periods and the paragraph's too long, you got run-on sentences and whatnot, and like making those mistakes and correcting those mistakes helps you learn than if you just had started off with knowing all the answers and knowing the right way to do it. And it also helps you memorize. It helps you remember things. And you can apply that same thing to like learning Spanish or learning a different language if you already speak Spanish. Like trying to speak it, making those mistakes, and then finding the answer and then correcting the mistake on your own, you learn better than if you already were just given the answer.
Starting small, but the idea of
According to the
ubiquitous
book.
spell checking software seems to indicate a stagnation of people's ability to actually improve their own spelling, which lets them repeatedly make similar and even identical errors without learning what is actually correct.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not the most harmful side effect in the world, but it's certainly not a good thing. Well, let's go one stone up, or step rather, but I'll make a comparison to a stone archway later on. And let's look at something else. Habitual use of GPS negatively impacts spatial memory during self guided navigation. This
Yeah.
study, from the Integrated Neuroscience Program at McGill University, I believe, was designed to examine the effects of GPS reliance among everyday drivers. And without spending too much time here boring everyone to death, it determined, quote, findings suggest that regularly using GPS affects spatial memory in a dose dependent manner. That is, the greater use of GPS, the greater decline in spatial memory over time. The lack of a concurrent decline in subjective sense of direction suggests that this relationship is likely to be causal, end quote. To be clear, I'm not making the argument that these tools should be abolished, or even that the
Sure.
possible risks outweigh the benefits, at least
Yep.
not for GPS or maybe spell checkers. But if you took a 21-year-old today, right now, most of them, not all, but most, took away their access to GPS on their phone or in the car intrinsically, and told them, go on a road trip across the state now, half of them probably couldn't even do it. And if they could,
Right.
it would take them an exorbitant amount of time because they haven't properly developed the skill set of reading road signs or navigating a physical map. Once
Yeah.
again, to make this abundantly clear, that's not the worst thing in the world. Lacking a skill set because you never needed to develop that skill set in the first place isn't intrinsically bad, especially if you can then figure out how to do something when it matters for yourself. But what if we go one step further now? Because
And to add to that, I feel like I'm pausing a lot, but to add to that, even if you already know the directions, like you're getting a directions to like a fucking Target or whatever, it's just for some random store. You're getting a direction to the grocery store that you've never been to before. You see the grocery store. You see the street and the road that goes to the grocery store. You've visually seen how to get there. But the GPS isn't telling you to turn left right here. It's telling you to go straight a little bit more and then turn left. So rather than just seeing, oh, the grocery store's right there, I just need to turn left. And like turning the GPS off, you go, well, it's telling me to go straight still. And then makes you go straight. And then all of a sudden tells you to do a U-turn and all this weird shit. Like, but you knew, you already had the answer. It was right there. But you instead like turned your brain off and just obeyed the GPS, obey the robot, you know? How many fucking times I've done that? I made a wrong turn because the GPS didn't tell me to turn. I'm like, I could have just fucking turned on my own.
even our ability to think critically and solve problems is now under siege thanks to the advent of generative tools. Picture a Roman archway, stones on top of stones, but it never stands free or supports any weight at all without something called a keystone. The keystone is the pinnacle of that archway. It often has a
Mm,
slightly different shape or it's measurably larger while dispersing the most
has to
weight
be
in the
like that, right?
process, therefore supporting the entire archway as a whole. And critical thinking is the keystone of human cognition. Spell checkers and GPS programs, they're just stones, one of many in the archway. But generative tools, according to new data from researchers directly at Microsoft, if used improperly, can, quote, result in the deterioration of cognitive faculties that ought to be preserved. As Bainbridge noted, a key irony of automation is that by mechanizing routine tasks and leaving exception handling to the human user, you deprive the user of the routine opportunities to practice their judgment and strengthen their cognitive musculature, leaving them atrophied and unprepared when the exceptions do arise. End
Damn.
quote. For this one, I
The
do have
brain
to
is
read a few more
literally a
segments,
muscle.
not just one, because
Well,
honestly, I just have to.
not
But
maybe
bear
not
with me.
literally, but
Quote, the data identify key motivators for critical thinking, the desire to enhance work quality, avoid negative outcomes, and develop skills. However, several barriers inhibit this reflective process, including lack of awareness, limited motivation due to time pressure or job scope, and difficulty improving AI responses in unfamiliar domains. Surprisingly, while AI can improve efficiency, it may also reduce critical engagement, particularly in routine or lower stakes tasks in which users simply rely on AI, raising concerns about long term reliance and diminished independent problem solving. And
exactly what I just said about following the GPS rather than, yeah.
quote. Much further down, continuing that same sort of logical pathway here, quote, over reliance on computing technology is not a novel phenomenon. However, Gen AI tools can exacerbate the associated risks. Indeed, such reliance may be tolerable for low stakes tasks like grammar checking, but it can
Yup.
lead to significant negative outcomes in high stakes contexts like drafting legal documents. End quote. And
Yep.
then lastly, thank you for sticking with me through all of this. From the conclusion paragraph,
No
quote,
problem, brother.
while Gen AI can improve worker efficiency, it can inhibit critical engagement with work and can potentially lead to long term over reliance on the tool and diminished skill for independent problem solving. End quote. It's a lot to get through, I know, and some people may laugh it off as overly dramatized, but the keystone, the one supporting all the extra weight, is the thing that supplants our own thinking, and that is precisely
Yeah.
what these new AI tools are designed to do. If you don't believe me, which is fine, by the way, what about this? I've used this example before in other videos, but I think I should probably show it again here because the implications behind it are pretty severe. Google, which obviously has their own AI model called Gemini, somewhat
Hmm.
recently began heavily marketing that program to a much wider audience using material like this. It's a pretty harmless video at first, but towards the end, you start to see something a little bit different than generate a funny image of a cat playing guitar, because they start advertising the service for things like generating emails. Cool, no big deal, you might say. Small stone in the massive archway. But then they cut to a scene where a teenage girl is asking this program, right in front of her friends, what's a good excuse to cancel dinner with my friends? You can certainly shrug it off as a goofy advertisement, but what happens when you actively market a product to teenagers, showcasing it as some sort of solution to feeling awkward, or even something that replaces basic
Damn.
interactions with friends? Ask the
Damn.
AI what to say to your friends instead of actually talking to your friends. Social aptitude
Yeah.
is a skill set, and using this kind of tool to replace that, which was already replaced already once by texting, as opposed to actually speaking to people, is one step further removed from using the muscle itself, which leads inexorably to atrophy. We're not just hindering the act of critical thinking, we're outright replacing it, which may not be quite as comedic when compared to a movie like Idiocracy, but the end result, beyond the jokes, the humor, and the absurd over exaggerations, the end result is a society that can't think for itself, therefore spiraling downwards. It's funny
Yeah.
because people hand wave all of this often as nothing. They say technology makes us smarter, but it's getting harder and harder for me to see it that way. If you want a much smaller but far more damning example of this in action, especially considering the warning that Microsoft researchers themselves gave in that document, right, regarding legal documents in particular, there was a case against Walmart initiated in 2023 and still making its way through the court system, where the legal representation for the plaintiff used 8 different case law examples that just don't exist because an AI hallucinated them. In a statement provided to the court directly, the law firm said, quote, our internal artificial intelligence platform hallucinated the cases in question while assisting our attorney in drafting the motion in limine. This matter comes with great embarrassment and has prompted discussion and action regarding the training, implementation, and future use of artificial intelligence within our firm. This serves as a cautionary tale for our firm and all firms as we enter this new age of artificial intelligence. End quote. Yeah, sure. And people instinctively making the argument that this won't be a problem once the AI is good enough might have a point. Maybe it won't be a problem. But think of it this way, that's a lawyer, supposedly one of the smartest professions on earth, if you ask everyday people. That's a lawyer who was having the AI do their work for them. You can pontificate all you want about how much better society will become as we perfect these types of tools and
Mm,
the efficiency it involves, but all I see is idiocracy being born in real time because
right.
human beings are not thinking anymore. What do we
Yeah.
suppose happens as automation and progressively smarter algorithms replace or eliminate more and more and more of the adverse situations that we might ever encounter, up to and including even peer to peer socialization? What do we think happens when the consolidation of our economy centers more and more on a few absurdly wealthy conglomerates, whose entire business model now relies on increasingly invasive advertising? What do we think happens when we construct tools that literally tell us every minute of every day where to walk, what to order, how to dress, or how to think? And how much different does that really look when compared to a movie like Idiocracy? Sure, I could drag the video on for a lot longer with more comparisons, like how
Yeah.
Wipeout, the game show, is effectively the same thing as Ow My Balls, or how when Joe and Rita attempt to escape in a car, there's a kill switch shutting down its battery. Yeah, contained in the enormous Infrastructure and Jobs Act, which was passed during the Biden administration recently, Section 24220, there's a mandate for systems that will, quote, passively monitor the performance of a driver of a motor vehicle to accurately identify whether that driver may be impaired and prevent or limit motor vehicle operation if an impairment is detected, end quote. Which is literally a kill switch for a car,
Yeah.
regardless of why you say you put it in there.
And the word impairment is very general. You could be impaired from anything. You know what I mean? You didn't get enough sleep last night, you're impaired. You had one wine at dinner, you're impaired. They they could just change whatever that definition means to put anything they want in there. You know, like you drink too much water, you had to use the bathroom, you're impaired. The speed limit says 35 and you accidentally went 36. That's evidence that you might be impaired. They're going to turn off your fucking car.
And the fact checkers all said, false, there's no kill switch mandate, which is bullshit. But setting all of that aside, looking past the comedic exaggerations as well, we are becoming idiocracy. As time goes on, more and more, under the profiteering pressure of major corporations, which was the entire point of idiocracy, more than likely resulting in its outright suppression at the box office, by the way, because it depicted certain brands in that way, which is hilarious. We are subverting our own ability to think critically, to solve problems, and to better ourselves. We rely more and more every day on simplified tools which do increasing amounts of our thinking for us. And the end result is atrophy of social and mental muscles that we used to exercise constantly every single day, which pushes us closer and closer to the drooling, incoherent morons of a decades old movie, which was never intended to be a blueprint. It was intended to be an absurd comedy. In the end, I think we, collectively, as in society, are steadily marching down the road of becoming idiocracy. It just won't be nearly as funny. A lot of people probably don't see it that way, which is fine, and it's obviously happening for different reasons than in the film. But I find that movie to be disconcertingly prophetic and uncomfortably accurate when you take a step back and realize it's only been 19 years since they made it. What do we really think the world is going to be like in 19 more? That's it. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. The video sponsor, of course, Ground News. Do consider locals and Patreon, please. I need to start pushing these platforms more, right? And get away from like just regular YouTube AdSense and other stuff too, merchandise, social media, etc. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for
Yeah.
watching. Question everything and have a nice night.
Yeah. Very interesting. Some good points he brought up. The reliance on technology And I kind of talked about it already about how our brains work and how if something isn't challenging enough, then it's harder to learn it. And um, it's not just harder to learn it, it's harder to remember it too, right? Which I guess it's part of learning memory, but you're even messing with your memory. If you don't want to think of it as a way like, well, I don't want to learn that type of stuff anyway, well, you at least want to remember things, and you're kind of disabling your ability or diminishing your ability to remember certain things. Um, like how many times have you gone to the same exact place over and over and over and over again? Maybe it's like the physical therapist or the gym or your favorite restaurant or something like that. You've been there plenty of times, but you're not sure quite how to get there. You're not quite sure on which the name of the street that it's on because every time you've gone there, you've used GPS. Um, and I do use a lot of uh, AI tools and GPS stuff like that, but I'm particularly talking about the GPS so much because it's the one that I can most relate to right now. But I've noticed this years ago that using GPS, while a very helpful tool to figure out where you're going, I was relying on it and I didn't know how the hell to get there without it. So rather than just say screw it and be relying on it, what I would do now is I would try to challenge myself and I'd be like, you know what? Okay, I'm gonna try to. I'll have the GPS on and I'll have it my phone over here, but I'm not gonna look at it. I'm gonna just look at the road and go where I think I need to go. Turn where I think I should turn and look for landmarks and the freeway numbers and stuff like that. And then if I'm driving for a while, I'm like, man, I don't, did I turn wrong? And I look at the GPS and be like, oh yeah, I did. So kind of just using it as like someone would use a leveler, right? Like you put the nail in the wall, you put the picture up on the wall, you adjust it. Does it look straight? I think it's straight. And then you get the leveler out and to see if it's actually straight. That's kind of how I use these things. Like I'll type an email and then if it kind of sounds weird or looks awkward, I'll like kind of copy paste the email into the AI or the spell checking grammar thing and be like, hey, does this sound grammatically correct? So I'm kind of practicing the thing that the book suggested where you try something on your own, you make errors and then you correct the errors. So using it in that sense, I think it's fantastic. But just being reliant on it and just saying, write me an email, sound apologetic, blah 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 blah, like that's what I think he's getting at in this video. And I completely agree with that. You're telling somebody to think for you, to act for you, to say things for you, and it seems like you are in charge and you have like this tool. Like, I don't need to do because this eventually the slave, so to speak, becomes the master, and now you start obeying it. It's said to say this. Well, now you have to say it. You can't. You don't know what to say on your own. Anyway, what the fuck am I talking about? Oh, I opened up my shit and I was like, man, please tell me that shit was recorded. All right.